finished that up, each one, so you have fairly even tension all the way around now. And the next step too is, if it dries like this, it has that bottle cap kind of look. Now I prefer the way it looks just aesthetically when it's all tight against the frame. There's a couple ways you can do that. On my own, I use just some elastic and I hold it together, or I use a band clamp. Or with the materials that I provide, you can also just use some electrical tape. And the only one thing about using the electrical tape, you have to be careful when you take it off, because it can pull a little bit of the membrane from the hide off. So I attach the tape. I want to put it around once, just so it kind of holds. It sticks better to itself than the wet membrane. As I'm going around, I'm just being careful. Okay, so now I'm around once, like that. And I can just go around again, kind of pulling that, just so it'll dry the way it is. And it'll dry flat and flush to the, it looks, to me, it just looks a little nicer when it dries that way. Okay. So I can cut that off. I like to fold this just so I have, when I peel it off, it's a little easier. Now, this skin, the membrane, will dry overnight, and I usually pull off the tape the next day, but the area where you pull off the tape, it'll take a while, another few hours for that to dry as well, once it gets the air to it. And pull it off, when you take this tape off, I'd recommend pulling it off very slowly, so it doesn't rip the membrane. Just it can have a tendency to rip the very top layer of the membrane a little bit, so just be careful with that. Okay, now the last thing I'd like to show is just how I make a leather handle here. What I use is this deer leather, and I use 4 feet of this deer leather, 2 feet for each side. Now again, this is a 4-foot length of the deer leather. What I like to do in this case is, again, fold it in half, and I'm just going to cut it in half. But one little trick is I want to cut it on an angle, on a fairly sharp angle. That'll help. So I have a bit of a point there. Okay. So here's the technique that I like to use from my experience. I'll go in between where the pointed section, and all I'm going to do is wrap around that. So that secures it there. I'll wrap around it and continue wrapping around, keeping the skin, the hair side, or the nice side of the deer lace, leather lace, up. So it's not going to move now, and I'll just continue to wrap that around. Again, there's many different ways to do this. This is a technique. I've made a lot of these, and I find this looks quite nice and is fairly simple. You don't need glue or anything else. Let's keep on wrapping that around. Make a little X in the center. Till we come to the opposite end. And then I'm just going to finish it off with a half hitch knot. And I like to kind of pull it underneath. It hides the knot underneath there. And again, you need a double half hitch to really hold from coming loose. But I like to get a pair of pliers, and that just allows me to pull a little tighter on that, just to help prevent it from coming out, and I can cut the excess off at that point. So that's one half, and then now I'll just do the other half. Okay, and that's the finished skin drum with the nice deer leather handle. Gives you a nice grip as well. Now, as I said, it usually takes overnight to dry, and I like to give it some aeration. One simple way is just to let the front, you can just put it on, hang it over the edge of the table a little bit, hang it up, or put the beater underneath it. That will let some airflow get to both sides of the drum. As it dries, moisture will come out of the membrane, and thus the membrane will contract or get tighter over top of the hoop. Now, if you've never used the sinew before, I just thought I'd mention there's kind of a wax coating on that. So that's a simple way of attaching a membrane to the frame, and it's got very well attached and a lot of very even tension around the. Okay, so this is the mallet that I just made, and this is a drum that I had skinned up last week. The other one's drying right now. So I just wanted to talk briefly about some drum maintenance. As you know, the skin holds moisture. And even though it's dry right now, it'll be affected by the moisture in the atmosphere. So the way I like to tighten them up is that they would be in a kind of a middle level of moisture, so they'll sound good in moisture levels from about 20% to about 70% humidity. Right now it's 80% humidity outside, but we're inside with some heat on inside, so it's quite a bit drier here. So the moisture will affect the hide. There are some ways that you can do. Take a hair dryer or a heat source, a fire, and put it near the membrane of the drum, the skin, and that'll draw out the moisture, thus tightening it up to get it to sound better, as many people like to say, to get a better voice from the drum. Some people might like a higher pitched drum. The tighter it is, the higher pitched it will be. Some people like a lower pitched drum. So you do have some control, but because it's strung up the way it is, there's very little control as to how tight it is, unlike a drum that has lugs that you can tighten up. So that's one of the things about these drums. I personally have two drums, but I know not everyone has that luxury. I have a rainy day drum and a dry day drum. One that sounds good in rainy days and one that sounds good in dry weather. This one's about an average drum. It tries to sound good in almost all weather. But if I was outside in a rainy day, I'd have to bring this to a heat source to bring it up a little bit. And here's basically what the drum sounds like.